Hi guys, welcome back. So today I'm going to read chapter 3 and 4 as they're quite short chapters. So I hope you guys enjoy. If you're ever minded to take the A21 out of Fairhaven and head into the heart of the Kentish Veld, you will eventually pass an old phone box still working on a sharp left-hand bend. Continue for around 100 yards until you see the sign for White Church, Abbott's Hatch and Lentz Hill, and then take a right. Head through Lentz Hill, past the Blue Dragon and the little farm shop with that big egg outside until you reach the small stone bridge over the Roberts Mere. Officially the Roberts Mere is a river, but don't get confused and expect anything grand. Take the single track right turn just past the bridge. You would think you are headed the wrong way, but this is quicker than the way the official brochure takes you and also picturesque, if you like, dappled hedgerows. Eventually the road widens out and peeking between tall trees, you will begin to see signs of life rising on the hilly land up to your left. Up ahead you will see a tiny wood-clad bus stop, also still working if one bus in either direction a day counts as working. Just before you reach the bus stop, you will see the entrance sign for Cooper's Chase on your left. They began work on Cooper's Chase about 10 years ago when the Catholic Church sold the land. The first residents, one for one, had moved in 3 years later. It was built as Britain's first luxury retirement village, though according to Ibrahim, who has checked, it was actually the 7th. There are currently around 300 residents. You can't move here until you're over 65, and the Waitrose delivery van clink with wine and repeat prescriptions every time they pass over the cattle grid. The old convent dominates Cooper's Chase with 3 modern residential developments spiraling out from the central point. For over 100 years, the convent was a hush building filled with the dry bustle of habits and the quiet certainty of prayers offered and answered. Tapping along its dark corridors, you would have found some women comfortable in their serenity, some women frightened of a speeding world, some women hiding, some women proving a vague, long-forgotten point, and some women taking joy in serving a higher purpose. You would have found single beds arranged in dorms, long, low tables for eating, a chapel so dark and quiet you would swear you would hear God breathing. In short, you would find the Sisters of the Holy Church, an army which would never give you up, which would feed you and clothe you, and continue to need and value you. All it required in return was a lifetime of devotion, and given there will always be someone requiring that, there were always volunteers. And then one day you would take the short trip up the hill, through the tunnel of trees, to the Garden of Eternal Rest, the iron gates and low stone walls of the garden looking over the convent, and the endless beauty of the Kentish high world beyond your body in another single bed under a simple stone, alongside the Sister Margarets and Sister Marys of the generations before you. If you had once had dreams, they could now play over the green hills, and if you had secrets, then they were kept safe inside the 4 walls of the convent forever. Or more accurately, 3 walls, as the west-facing side of the convent is now entirely glazed to accommodate the residents' swimming pool complex. It looks out over the bowling green and then further down to the visitors' car park, the permits for which are rationed to such an extent that the parking committee is the single most powerful cable within Cooper's Chase. Beside the swimming pool is a small arthritis therapy pool, which looks like a jacuzzi, largely for the reason that it is a jacuzzi. Anyone given the grand tour by the owner, Ian Vetham, would then be shown the sauna. Ian would always open the door a crack and say, "Blimey, it's like a sauna in there." That was Ian. Take the lift up to the recreation rooms next, the gym and the entire exercise studio, where residents could happily Zumba among the ghosts of the single beds. Then there's the jigsaw room for gentler activities and associations. There's the library and the lounge for the bigger and more controversial committee meetings, or for football on the flat screen TV. Then down again to the ground floor where the long, low tables of the convent refectory are now the contemporary upscale restaurant. At the very heart of the village, attached to the convent, is the original chapel. Its a pale cream stucco exterior makes it look almost Mediterranean against the fierce Gothic darkness of the convent. The chapel remains intact and unchanged, one of the few convenants insisted upon by the executors of the Sisters of the Holy Church when they had sold out 10 years ago. The residents like to use the chapel. This is where the ghosts are, where the habits still bustle, and where the whispers have sunken into the stone. It is a place to make you feel part of something slower and something gentler. Ian Vetham is looking into contractual loopholes that might allow him to redevelop the chapel into 8 more flats. Attached to the other side of the convent, the very reason for the convent, is Willows. Willows is now the nursing home for the village. It has been established by the sisters in 1841 as a voluntary hospital, charitably tended to the sick and broken when no other option existed. In the latter part of the last century, it had become a care home until legislation in the 1980s led to the doors finally closing. The convent then simply became a waiting room, and when the last nun passed away in 2005, the church wasted no time in cashing in and selling it as a job lot. The development sits in 12 acres of woodland and beautiful open hillside. There are 2 small lakes, one real and one created by Ian Betham's builder Tony Curran and his gang. The many ducks and geese that also called Cooper's Chase home seem to much prefer the artificial one. There are still sheep farmed at the very top of the hill, where the woodland breaks, and in the pastures by the lake is a herd of 20 llamas. Ian Betham had bought 2 to look quirky in sales photos and had got out of hand, as these things do. That in a nutshell is what the place is. Chapter 4. I first kept a diary many years ago, but I've looked back at it and I don't think it would be of any interest to you. Unless you're interested in Haywards Heath in the 1970s, which I'm going to assume you're not, that is no offence to either Haywards Heath or to the 1970s, both of which I enjoyed at the time. But a couple of days ago, after meeting Elizabeth, I went to my first ever meeting of the Thursday Murder Club, and I have been thinking that perhaps it might be interesting to write about. Like whoever wrote that diary about Holmes and Watson, people love a murder, whatever they might say in public, so I will give it a go. I knew the Thursday Murder Club was going to be Elizabeth Ibrahim Arif, who lives in Wordsworth with a wraparound balcony, and Ron Ritchie. Yes, that Ron Ritchie. So that was something else exciting. Now I know him a bit better, the shine has worn off a little, but even so. Penny Gray has also used to be part of it, but she is now in Willows, that's the nursing home. Thinking about it now, I fitted right in. I suppose there had been a vacancy and I was the new Penny. I was nervous at the time, though I remember that. I took along a nice bottle of wine, $8.99 to give you an idea, and as I walked in, the 3 of them were already there in the jigsaw room, laying out photographs on the table. Elizabeth had formed the Thursday Murder Club with Penny. Penny had been an inspector in the Kent Police for many years, and she would bring along the files of unsolved murder cases. She wasn't really supposed to have the files, but who was to know? After a certain age, you can pretty much do whatever takes your fancy. No one tells you off except for your doctors and your children. I'm not supposed to say what Elizabeth used to do for a living, even though she does go on about it herself at times. Suffice to say, though, that the murders and investigations and what have you wouldn't be unfamiliar work for her. Elizabeth and Penny would go through every file, line by line, study every photograph, read every witness statement, just looking for anything that had been missed. They didn't like to think that there were guilty people still happily going about their business, sitting in the gardens doing a sudoku, knowing that they had got away with murder. Also, I think that Penny and Elizabeth just thoroughly enjoyed it. A few glasses of wine and a mystery, very social but also gory. It is good fun. They would meet every Thursday, that's how they came up with the name. It was Thursday because there was a 2-hour slot free in the jigsaw room between art history and conversational French. It was booked and still is booked under the name Japanese Opera, a discussion, which ensured they were always left in peace. There were certain favours both of them could call upon for different reasons, and all sorts of people had been called in for a friendly chat over the years. Forensic officers, accountants and judges, tree surgeons, horse breeders, glass blowers, they'd all been to the jigsaw room, whomever Elizabeth and Penny thought might help them with some query or another. Ibrahim had soon joined them. He used to play bridge with Penny and helped them out once or twice with bits and bobs. He is a psychiatrist, or was a psychiatrist, or still is. I'm not quite sure. When you first meet him, you can't see that at all, but once you get to know him, it makes a sort of sense. I would never have therapy because he wants to unravel all that knitting. Not worth the risk, thank you. My daughter Joanna has a therapist, although you'd be hard pushed to know why if you saw the size of her house. Either way, Ibrahim no longer plays bridge, which I think is a shame. Ron had all but invited himself, which won't surprise you. He wasn't buying Japanese opera for a second and walked into the jigsaw room one Thursday, wanting to know what was afoot. Elizabeth admired suspicion above all else and invited Ron to flick through the file of a scoutmaster found burned to death in 1982 in Woodland just after age 27. She soon spotted Ron's key strength, namely he never believes a single word anyone ever tells him. Elizabeth now says that the reading police files and the certain knowledge that the police are lying to you is surprisingly effective. It's called the jigsaw room, by the way, because this is where the bigger jigsaws are completed, on a gently sloping wooden table in the center of the room. When I first walked in, there was 2,000 pieces of Whitstable Harbour, missing a letterbox of Skye. I once went to Whitstable just for the day, but I couldn't really see what the fuss was all about. Once she'd done the oysters, there's no real shopping to speak of. Anyway, Ibrahim had put a thick perspex screen over the jigsaw, and this is where he, Elizabeth and Ron were laying out the autopsy photos of the poor girl, the one who Elizabeth thought had been killed by her boyfriend. This particular boyfriend was bitter at being invalided out from the army, but there's always something, isn't there? We all have a sob story, but we don't all go around killing people. Elizabeth told me to shut the door behind me and come and take a look at some pictures. Ibrahim introduced himself, shook my hand, and told me there were biscuits. He explained that there were 2 layers, but they tried to finish the top layer before they started the bottom layer. I told him he was preaching to the converted there. Ron took my wine and put it by the biscuits. He nodded at the label and commented that it was a white. He then gave me a kiss on the cheek, which gave me pause for thought. I know you might think that a kiss on the cheek is normal, but for men in the 70s it isn't. The only men who kiss you on the cheek are sons-in-laws or people like that, so I had Ron down as a quick worker straight away. I found out that the famous trade union leader Ron Ritchie lived in the village when he and Penny's husband, John, nursed an injured fox back to health and called it Scargill. The story had featured in the village newsletter when I first arrived. Given that John had been a vet and Ron was well run, I suspected that John had done the nursing and Ron had simply been on naming duties. The newsletter, by the way, is called Cut to the Chase, which is a pun. We all crowded around the autopsy photos, the poor girl and that wound that should never have killed her, even back in those days. The boyfriend had boarded from Penny's squad car on the way to a police interview and hadn't been seen since. He'd given Penny a belt for her troubles too, no surprises there. If you hit women, you hit women. Even if he hadn't run off, I suppose he would have got away with it. I know you still read about these things all the time, but it was even worse back then. The Thursday Murder Club wasn't about to magically bring him to justice. I think everyone knew that. Penny and Elizabeth had solved all sorts of cases to their own satisfaction, but that was as far as they could go. So I suppose you could say that Penny and Elizabeth never really got their wish. All those murderers remained unpunished, all still out there, listening to the shipping forecast somewhere. They had got away with it, as some people do, I'm afraid. The older you get, the more you have to come to terms with that. Anyway, that's just me being philosophical, which will get us nowhere. Last Thursday was the first time it was the 4 of us, Elizabeth, Ibrahim, Ron and me, and as I say, it seemed very natural, as if I was completing their jigsaw again. I will leave the diary there for now. There is a big meeting in the village tomorrow. I helped to put the chairs out for these sorts of things. I volunteered because A, it makes me look helpful, and B, it gives me first dibs at the refreshments. The meeting is a consultation about a new development at Cooper's Chase. Ian Bentham, the big boss, is coming to talk to us about it. I try to be honest where I can, so I hope you don't mind me saying I don't like him. He's all the things that can go wrong with a man if you leave him to his own devices. There's been a fearsome hoo-ha about the new development because they're chopping down trees and uprooting a graveyard, and there's a rumour of wind turbines. Ron is looking forward to causing a bit of trouble, and I'm looking forward to watching him do that. From now on, I promise to try to write something every day. I'll keep my fingers crossed that happens. Something happens. So that's the end of chapter 3 and 4. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you guys have any books that you would like me to read, just comment in the comment box, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.